All right.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Viviana. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon, morning, if you're on the West Coast. I don't know where all of you are, but I'm based in Chicago, Illinois. It's a beautiful day here in Chicago. And I hope that you are all having a wonderful day. And I wish you in advance a wonderful weekend. I'm extremely excited, and our team has been very excited about today's HITEC Live webinar. Specifically because we really want to highlight this new partnership at HITEC with Revature. I know that we have a lot of people on the webinar today that may not necessarily be very familiar with HITEC and our work, so I want to take a quick moment to introduce HITEC. We'd love to be able to connect with you all individually, independent of this event, but HITEC is a nonprofit organization that is really focused on developing Hispanic technology leaders and executives. We are the largest, really the community of Hispanic technology executives and professionals that are committed to helping bring up the next generation of Latino tech executives and leaders. And I can't think of a better time where I can't think of a time where our work has been more needed and more important. Obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic, our lives have really been turned upside down. And I really believe that, that the technology that we have available to us today is really what has enabled us to continue to move forward, to continue to do business, to continue to learn, and to continue to grow as individuals and professionals and as companies. And I take a tremendous sense of pride knowing that in many of those companies that you read about or you see in the papers or in the news, that there are Latino executives that are leading in digital transformation, that are leading in helping bring about this next generation of technologies and this next generation of how we do business. And I get really excited when we get to connect and bring together our students, whether it's through the HITEC Foundation or through partnerships with companies like Revature, to really begin to build that pipeline for future growth and for future success. I mentioned the HITEC Foundation, and I know that we have a number of students that are participating in this webinar today. And so I did want to make sure that everybody was aware. So HITEC has a sister organization called the HITEC Foundation. And this foundation is exclusively dedicated to helping Latino college and graduate level students in the form of scholarships, in the form of internships, in the form of mentoring. We just made announcements for this upcoming 2020-2021 HITEC Scholars class or cohort. We're proud to say that we have awarded 35 Hispanic college and graduate level students from across the country, from universities like Harvard, MIT, Stanford. We have awarded all of these 35 students $5,000 scholarships. The scholarship comes thanks to the generous support of Bank of America with a brand new MacBook laptop that they can use. And we are working with our corporate partners and also now with Revature to be able to identify internship and employment opportunities for these students. Because one of the things that we like to say to them is, yeah, $5,000 is great, and I'm sure it goes a long way to help with your tuition, but the real value is getting that opportunity at a real company and getting that mentorship and being placed in that path to get that first job out of college, and to make sure that you have that leg up against other people and other students your age. And so we're really excited about this partnership. So I want to introduce our three panelists today, but I want to first start by recognizing and thanking Amit Sevak, who's on the line with us, who is the president of Revature. Amit has spent more than 20 years working on the intersection of education and technology with leadership roles at the University of Europe and HITEC. And we were just chatting before we got started, and originally from Chicago, so always good to connect with a fellow Chicagoan. And then also a longtime friend of HITEC, Jorge Benavidez, who is the Senior Vice President at Revature, where he advises executives and leadership teams on building and implementing new talent strategies to accelerate growth, increase diversity, and improve talent retention. He is an immigrant from Costa Rica, so this is where Susana does her little thing. And he's passionate about closing the opportunity gap and bringing diversity into the tech industry. Prior to joining Revature, Jorge was a sales leader at Oracle, and he is our liaison between Revature and HITEC. And then lastly, I want to introduce Bob Gasser, who is Revature's Chief Revenue Officer. Bob started his career at JP Morgan, where he ultimately ran US equities. He went from there to become the CEO of 2 public companies over the span of 12 years. After a year as a senior advisor to McKinsey, he joined Barclays, where he focused on a number of strategic projects on behalf of the group CEO, one of which was the recruiting, training, and professional development for entry-level software engineers. We are incredibly excited for this superstar panel, and so I will go on mute and turn it over to Bob Gasser. Thank you.
Omar, thank you for that very kind introduction. We deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak to this community about, I know that HITEC has had a fantastic track record of focusing on technology leadership, Hispanic technology leadership. And hopefully we're here today to talk about the foundational elements of all that, is really feeding the pipeline for the future leadership within technology organizations within the United States. So what I thought I'd do is maybe we've put together a survey of both students and the demand side, thanks to our good friends at our partners at HITEC, and we'll talk to the results of that survey, which we think are pretty insightful. There's a lot of interesting points of intersection that hopefully coming out of this, hopefully create a bit of a call to action for all of us collectively to focus on emerging Hispanic technology talent and how to best accomplish your firm's D&I objectives. And for the students on today's call, your objectives to obtain a job in the technology sector. So welcome to everyone, and thank you, Omar, for hosting us today. So what I thought I'd do is maybe start out with a level set around Revature, give you a sense of our business model. So Viviana, if you could advance a slide. So who are we? Who's Revature? Revature is a firm that we are the leading recruit, train, and deploy firm in the United States. And what have we done over the past several years? Well, we trained 7,000 software engineers to enter the technology space across a broad variety of industries, of firms across the United States. We've recruited from 700 universities. So that gives you a sense of the broad scope of the net that we cast to find talent. And I like to always say that we find folks who have the ability, they have the motivation, they have the aptitude, but they may not have the visibility that a lot of folks have to an aspirant technology career. At the top of our funnel, we had over 148,000 applications to Revature last year. And those come from a variety of different sources, university partnerships. They come from our online training capability called Revature Pro, which anybody on this call can sign up for Revature Pro. Anybody with a .edu address has full access to the content of Revature, of our training content. I want to stress that we're not a boot camp. We pay folks to train, which is a very different model than the boot camp model. Once you apply to Revature at the top of that funnel, and it comes, as I said, it comes from a variety of different sources, university partnerships, Revature Pro. We hold a lot of virtual events, as you can imagine. Basically, at the top of that funnel, you go through a bunch of different gates and traps in terms of soft skill evaluation, hard skill evaluation, tech screens, and ultimately, we accepted about 1% of the applicants last year into our program. As you can imagine, they come from CS programs, they come from STEM programs, but they come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Getting back to that original point of it's all about aptitude and ability. We have music majors that have excelled within our programs and are now deployed at major corporations around the United States. When you join Revature, you agree to do 3 things. You sign a contract with Revature for 2 years. You agree to relocate anywhere in the United States, and you agree to be trained in the technology of our choice. And the technologies that we train it for are really all driven by demand from clients. So we have 54 unique curricula here in our training programs. You join us now virtually, trainer-led, over a 10 to 12-week period. Previous to that, we have 5 training centers around the United States. In fact, Omar, we were about to expand into Chicago, into your neighborhood, pre-COVID. But we have about 300 folks in training right now. We're not subject to the academic year, so we have a continuous supply of folks that are coming into the firm and being trained by the firm and ultimately being deployed by the firm. Throughout that 10 to 12-week program, you're going through a significant amount of evaluation. Our bar is very, very high in terms of demands of the requirements of our corporate customers. And it's an intense program. It is daily, 8 hours a day, but significant work outside of the classroom. And we're really preparing you to be what I describe as commercially prepared to be deployed inside of a real technology, a software engineering environment. I was a customer of Revature at Barclays. That's what attracted me to the firm. I fell in love with the mission and with the kids and what we do. But it is an intense program. At about the 8 to 9 week mark throughout that program, employers come in, they start to interview our associates, our candidates, and they make their selections, typically within about 48 hours. So it's almost like, for those of you on the phone who come from the corporate world, it's almost like a super day in recruiting parlance. And they make their selections, and then our folks deploy right after matriculation out of our program to the client site, where they're an employee of Revature for a period of time before they're converted into full-time employees. A couple of interesting fun facts that result from this whole process. One is 85% of our folks are ultimately converted by corporate customers. 89% are retained after 4 years. And when you think about that, you think about the destruction that churn and folks leaving, particularly in the Gen Z millennial era. It can be very destructive to a software engineering organization who spends a lot of time and effort in developing that person and trying to retain them. So we're very, very proud of the retention rate that we achieve across our deployments. We have a very significant exposure to the D&I community. We have about 34% of our associates who are deployed in the field are people of color, either Black or Hispanic. We have significant efforts in women in tech. We have significant efforts focused on LGBTQH. We're starting to even venture into the neurodiversity field, where I know a lot of big companies like Microsoft and my former employer have been extremely successful with those programs. And ultimately, our goal is to close that skills gap, and sometimes that soft skills gap between what students are learning in academia and ultimately what employers require. And what comes out of the survey, I think loud and clear, is that notion that we really have to work hard on closing that skills gap to create the opportunity for emerging tech talent. And that's what Revature is all about. So with that, I'd like to maybe have Amit give you some of his perspectives. He really is the subject matter expert from our side, having run a major Mexican university and having some real connectivity to family members in the technology space. So Amit.
Thanks very much, Bob. That great overview. And again, thanks to HITEC and Omar and the team for having us on this session. If you jump over to the, let me see, is that on the next slide? If you jump to the next slide for a second, is that the survey? Okay, no, actually, let me talk off of the prior slide first, and then we can go and jump into the survey. Yeah, just real quickly on the supply side, basically, as you can see in that circle in the top left, we've got a network of universities that we work with. We have 700 universities altogether. There are about 3,000 universities in the United States, and we work with 700 of them. We work with the largest institutions that provide students with a foundation in either computer science or in other STEM fields. So our associates come from backgrounds in science, in technology, in math, in different types of engineering, but also we have associates that don't come from an engineering or computer science background. One of the things that makes Revature unique is that we're really looking for, as Bob said, for aptitude and attitude, right? The ability to, and the desire to really learn a technical skill as they look to enter the job world. So that's one of the things that really is transformative in terms of life-changing opportunity that we look to provide. So across the 700 universities that we work with, we look for talent coming fresh from institutions, and we partner with these institutions to help us identify that talent. We're in the process right now of going beyond working with career services, which is our primary point of contact, to starting to work with the academic side and to start identifying certain kinds of programs that we can embed during the junior and senior year of college students' academic career. That way we can further expand this notion of providing access and exposure to career opportunities in technology for college students across the United States. We're really proud of the work that we do of identifying talent across diverse backgrounds. We really are proud of the work we've done in the African American community of bringing more women. And we've been making a really big focus lately on veterans, people that come with military background. So there's a big focus on that. And obviously we're very interested in helping empower and enable individuals of Hispanic background, right, upon finishing college as they look for a tech career, that we can help make that possible. So we're that last mile between the graduation of college and the start of a technology career. By joining Revature, individuals get that opportunity to get those foundational, or what we call day one skills. So we've been actively working with universities across the country on identifying the talent, looking at new opportunities to expand program offerings. And we're doing this with some of our key technology partners, Salesforce, for example, with Pega. We're working with a few more institutions that are in the pipeline right now as we look to expand in that regard. So that's a little bit of our overview. Revature is this connection between college graduates and that first entry-level job at some of these big technology-oriented opportunities.
All right, fantastic. So I think I might take it from here. Hello everyone, I'm Jorge Benavidez. I'll be acting as your moderator today. Vivian, if we can move to the next slide. Let me first begin by discussing some of the highlights at the foundation, at the core of this conversation that we're having today. In order to gather data to inform some of the questions that will be asked in this debate, we actually run surveys divided in two main pillars. One from the demand side, what we call the employers, most of the people here who is already working in corporate positions, and another one for the students. The one from the students was actually done through the Handshake network, which is the largest university career network encompassing over 700 universities. We had about 332 responses from their end. The people who filled the survey identified themselves as people studying right now STEM-related careers and of Hispanic origin. On the other side of the aisle, you might say, is the demand. Essentially, the employers. We broke this down actually into two main sections. One was done within the Revature customers, and another one within the HITEC community. So as I go through the slides and explain some of the highlights of our findings, you will find that perhaps some of the questions that you feel during the previous surveys might not match some of the questions here, but that's the reason why. Not everyone actually had the same survey, but we wanted to have a very wholesome set of qualitative data on this regard. So having said that, let me move to like the first question. I will just go, just to explain here, I will just go briefly to some of the main highlights. This is by no means all the questions, but these are some of the items that will inform the rest of our conversations today. So on the first slide, this is from the demand side. This was a question posed to the employers. We found that 54% questioned the commitment of their organizations to augmenting diversity. The question was, in your opinion, how much of a priority is the recruitment of Hispanics as part of the diversity and inclusion strategies of the technology companies in the US? Next slide. Then we find that 87% will say no or is unsure with regards to how they feel about their organization's Hispanic recruited initiatives, and if they're actionable and properly founded. Essentially, distinguishing between the real commitment of the organization to move ahead with their initiatives. On the next slide, we find that 87% of the respondents neither agree or disagree with how they feel about their organization recruitment initiatives. This is actually very tied together with the previous slide. On the next one, we actually found that a lot of the employers found that they were recruiting for a very narrow list of colleges. And this is perhaps something of a self-selection program that we'll analyze later in the conversation. Moving on, this is actually a question here on the supply side. This was a question made to the applicants, to the students. We found that the Hispanics, and this is very telling, 87% of them are working while they're in college. This is a very important hindsight that I'm sure has a lot of repercussions in the way they approach school. On the next slide, 77%, we found that the students say that 77% of the jobs they were applying for were requiring experience. The next slide, only 8% of them had exposure to a tech professional in their network circle. And on the next slide, 58% of the respondents were first generation graduates. Then in the following slide, only 46% of them have applied for internships. And finally, on the last slide, we'll find that 86% of them believe it will be easier if they knew a technology professional, in the midst as a way to get advice and further their career. So I think these are very interesting data points that will, give us some food for thought as we move forward with the conversation. So let me then first begin by, asking this first question to Bob. Robert, in your experience, how does a large organization really break down the inertia when it comes to recruiting early career talent with a particular focus in diversity and inclusiveness?
Yeah, so having lived through a number of big organizations and the way they operate, I can tell you that my experience suggests that it really happens from the ground level. The D&I initiative can be articulated, it could be funded, it could be focused, it could be all the things you need it to be in terms of recruiting early career talent. But it has to be armed effectively in that war for talent. And I'll get to a few examples of that. One is you need evangelists within the existing technology organization. So once you get from the C-suite and you're now 4 or 5 pay grades down in the organization, you'll see that a lot of the enthusiasm starts to dissipate. And so really what you need to do is you need to build a ground game around evangelists. And they could be obviously Hispanic technologists, or they could be folks that are white males like myself, but they have to find evangelists to evangelize for that effort and to really prepare for the next step, which is once these folks have joined the firm, how are you developing them? How are you retaining them? How are you progressing them through their career? Because ultimately, that's what really defines retention. But as it pertains to the basically the beginning of the process, I think to use a hockey analogy, you really have to skate to the puck. You have to skate to where the student is. And I think a lot of the data here is very, very telling, in that a lot of these folks have not had internships, so they don't have that first rung in the ladder. They don't have that first professional organization on their CV. A lot of them don't have the bandwidth because they're working to support themselves in college. A lot of them are first generation grads. So our population is 40%, but throughout Revature, but 60% is a high number. And it gets to this notion of visibility. How do you provide them with the visibility to think outside the box, to think about an aspirational career with a world-class technology organization? And I think it really speaks to probably a number of things. One is you've got to widen the net in terms of the universities you recruit from. You've got to create digital media campaigns that are effective and that lure these folks into the process. And you've got to create a democratization in terms of the acceptance and not only the acceptance of a resume, but an evaluation of the resume, probably in a very different way than you may be doing today. So when I think about the call to action, I think about the conditions under which these folks are studying and then starting the career process, the discovery process, and then ultimately going through what is, can be a very, very intense acceptance process. Those are the things I think ultimately that need to be in place for this to work effectively.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. Let me follow up with Amit. We are hearing a lot about the value of secondary education, particularly in a remote learning environment. Are you surprised by the responses, by some of the data we gather here from the students on the value of their education?
Yeah, no, it's, I think it's interesting. Right now, when we look at what a lot of folks, a lot of stakeholders are seeing about the return on investment of their education and the impact that it has on their career, there's a lot of questions that are getting raised throughout society, really, in terms of what's the value of a four-year college education? What's the value of certain majors? Does it make sense to really pursue my passion independent of the economics? What's the value of and the probability of getting a job? What type of job, what type of salary can I get from this investment in my education? And so there's a lot of questions that are getting raised, and more and more, even leaders in universities, leaders in other education organizations are recognizing that they need to do what organizations like us at Revature and other companies that have been really focused on this workforce development space have been doing, which is to try to find what's the job that we're training for. What's the marketplace doing? Because what's happening that's different and that's both exciting but also challenging is that there is such a dramatic shift, Jorge, in the employment market. More and more jobs are getting digitized. More and more of the new jobs that are getting created require technology. More and more expectations on soft skills. And a lot of the organizations are not equipped for that. A lot of traditional universities, traditional high schools, K-12 schools, secondary schools, are not really prepared for teaching those kinds of skills that are relevant for the transforming future of work entry-level jobs. And the gap, frankly, is growing, Jorge. More and more juniors and seniors are seeing this because the entry-level job expectations require so much more technology. And I'm not talking about software developers. I'm not talking just about, coding. I'm talking about being able to use systems for business analysis, being able to use different types of tools, different types of analytic capabilities. Also, the kinds of skills that are being asked for are really almost 21st century skills in some ways. The type of critical thinking that one's expected to do, the type of communication skills, the type of collaboration skills, particularly now in the remote work world. These types of skills that are being asked for entry-level workers is significantly different from what the traditional four-year college curriculum or the four-year high school curriculum is based on, or the two-year associate degree. So I'm not surprised that people are challenging the value of education and asking the question, how can I get prepared? So our advice really has been, take matters into your own hands. There's so many things that one can do in terms of developing those kinds of networks, getting exposed to careers early, doing internships in creative ways, being very thoughtful about what are the kinds of individuals in terms of mentors that one wants to seek early on. These are things that the individual can do, where in some cases institutions haven't quite gotten there too. There are some institutions that are doing, Jorge, a better job of this. The Northeasterns of the world. Georgetown happens to have some good initiatives in this space. There's some activity that's happening in pockets that you see throughout the country. But on the whole, there's still this growing divide between what education is producing and what employers are wanting.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Turning back to you, Bob. We hear a lot. There's some interesting slides that we went through in which corporate citizens are questioning their the commitment of their organizations to diversity. In your opinion, what is the best way to align an organization in a way that achieves these objectives?
Yeah, I think it really does require complete alignment and as I said, very distinct strategies for each segment of the population within diversity and inclusion that you're pursuing. And so it starts at the top, obviously, but those edicts, as I like to call them, that are focused on, we're going to do this, 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 a lot of times don't align with the reality of the investment and ultimately the organizational commitment. And so that commitment it cannot stop at C-3. It's got to permeate its way all the way down the chain of command, down to the hiring manager, the person who's now taken an interest in this particular individual or group of individuals, in hiring them into their teams, and their ongoing professional development. So, organizational alignment is, I think, absolutely critical and big organizations tend to break down as you get lower and lower and lower down the as I said, the chain of command. So it means that within diversity initiative, you need to have Black student initiatives. You need to have Hispanic institutional initiatives. You have to have LGBTQH initiatives. Maybe, as I said earlier, a neurodiversity initiative. If you go across the spectrum of those things, they each require a unique commitment, a unique investment, and unique strategy. You've got to meet the student where they are. And that may require also dispelling the rigidity of the recruiting process. What I found is that, even when I was recruiting for traders and salespeople, I used to say to the talent acquisition folks, I'd say, can we hire another Yale lacrosse player? Is that really a good thing for this organization? Why are we not talking to the Paces of the world? Why are we not talking to the CUNYs of the world? Why are we not talking to Morehouse? Why have we narrowed our focus in such a way that we're creating a self-selected generation of new people coming into this organization that are all going to think the same way? But one thing that's really important is that, and I'm a deep believer in this, self-interest is a beautiful thing. And what aligns organizations with D&I is not only checking the box and saying that we're a diverse institution and we've got different points of view and different cultures are represented. That's great. That's awesome. That's altruistic. But look at the retention numbers. Look at our population of folks are a great representation of a diverse workforce. Look at the retention numbers. Most banks 2 years out have a very hard time retaining even 50% of the folks that they've recruited to the firm. So that's where self-interest aligns with that's where the self-interest of the organization and the self-interest of the candidate align perfectly. So self-interest, and we've got to get to a place where organizations recognize that and know that there actually is a good business case to be made here, not an altruistic case, a business case.
Thank you. A great point. And Bob, you made a great point also earlier in this question about reaching out to those places in America that might not have the exposure that places here close to Silicon Valley might have. Let me actually redirect this question then to Amit. Based on that notion, in your experience, what really makes a good versus dysfunctional career service platform for an education institution?
What makes a good career services platform for an education institution? It is really having a pulse on what employers are looking for and finding the connection between the aspiration of their graduating students and that pulse. Career services is an underinvested, underutilized, underappreciated function at universities. Up until just very recently, most presidents and provosts didn't spend too much time thinking about the career services function. They spent a lot of their time thinking about research, a lot of time thinking about, do I have the right faculty? Am I managing the faculty senate? And am I raising the fundraising that I need to go build my facilities and keep the alumni happy, right? And so the pressure points that leadership has in higher education often didn't put career services as one of the top 3 or top 5 or even top 10 initiatives for many, many years. It wasn't a priority to get jobs for the graduates. That's now started to shift in the last 5 to 10 years, and especially in the current economic environment that we have, right? With the economic challenges, the employment challenges, obviously with the health crisis, the pandemic in the context of all of this, this has now become much more important. And so career services is an area where institutions of higher learning have a big opportunity. And so the first thing that a good career services office has is an understanding of not just the jobs that are available, but the careers that are available. Because you can get a first job at just about, you know, all kinds of places, right? But to find the positions that actually help individuals build a career, thinking not just 1 year out, but 3 to 5 years out, is an important aspect of what a good career office does. And then understanding really well, what are the passions, the interests of students? And a lot of what career services skill set, particularly the good career services functions do, is really coaching. It's really coaching students to help them understand who they are, what they want to be, and helping invest in that. For the students that are on the line here, and for those that have kids that are students, I would just really invite you to really spend the time with that function, challenge that function if you feel that they're not delivering what you're looking for as a parent or as a student of the university, but also see that as an opportunity, because career services offices nowadays have many technology tools that didn't even exist a few years ago. Many of them use platforms like Handshake or Simplicity or Piazza, or a number of other platforms that allow students to post their resumes and for employers to get access to these student profiles. Are you on there? How can you leverage it more? How can you leverage some of the tools more? So there's a lot of things I think that are happening in the career services world that are exciting, but there is also a lot of room to grow to help them be successful. We interact on a daily basis with hundreds of career services functions throughout the country. And so we've really seen that transformation. We see career services starting to step up more, but there's continue to be room for opportunity there as well.
Thank you. And let me follow up on that real quick. In your opinion, what really separates what we all know as the elite educational institutions in the US? When you graduate from there, you don't have a problem getting a job pretty much anywhere. You're not competing for getting a job, you're competing to getting the best offer. But when you're actually coming from rural America, let's say someplace in middle America that might not have the exposure to like Silicon Valley, I mean, the differences between the academic content and their ability to get the job, I think go at the core of what you was just explaining about the career service institution. And yet I think we see that, we see a lot of talent like in the role, just waiting to be tapped. I mean, what do you think can be done better by corporate America, really, in reaching out to these institutions that perhaps don't have the exposure, the name, the prestige to attract them and present? Yeah,
if I'm a corporate recruiter and I'm looking to recruit and find really talent on college campuses across the country, I think the first thing I'm thinking about is what's my value proposition? Just exactly as Bob said, what is the value of being employed with my organization? What are the skills I'm building? What are the cultural contexts that I'm learning and grasping and being a part of? What are the opportunities, right, for them? And to really package it and to be thoughtful about it. You know, entry-level jobs are really the beginning for many folks in organizations. And, you know, given that individuals may not stay at a company for more than a couple of years, they also become ambassadors for you. So really investing in an entry-level program that includes a clear value proposition and the skills, the culture, the sense of community, the sense of alumni benefits, if you will, because you want to assume that at some point they may move on to other things. I think that's really important. Another one is the brand. How does my company represent itself at the universities? What does it stand for? A lot of focus now on social impact, for example, something that Gen Y, Gen Z students really care about is the social impact of my brand. Is that something that I'm resonating with students? I also think social media, particularly targeted for college students as a way to engage with that brand, is an important aspect of it. And then lastly, you know, companies can do a lot of good, with universities. And I'm not just talking about scholarships and, you know, providing programs. I'm talking about really serving. And there's a lot of ways that companies can engage their employees to provide programs, especially programs for folk coming from different minority groups, activities that engage directly in research, on-campus programming, mentorship, internships, right? Even virtual internships in this day and age. There's a lot of things companies can do to really engage with particularly juniors and seniors. That's really powerful. And I think the time right now when all of us are, you know, sitting at home and interacting via virtual, this is the time where we can really unleash the power of the employee base of companies to really engage with companies, to really help these institutions recruit the best.
Fantastic. Thank you for that great answer. Bob, back to you. You spoke before about that gap between, you know, the initiatives and making it effective and how it permeates all the way down in the leadership ladder. Who do you think makes the best champion within an organization to enlist in the war for diversity talent?
I think you're on mute, Bob.
Thanks, Viviana. The folks that make the best champions within an organization are, and you find them everywhere. There are folks who have climbed the ladder, who've lived through the experience, for instance, of being, you know, an Hispanic technologist who grew up in a rural environment, for instance, may not have had the same advantages that a lot of students have, and who are willing to put themselves on the line in terms of commitment, and that's commitment of both time, energy, and passion to that exercise. One of the things that retracted me, one of the reasons I left 32 years of a career in financial services was, over the years, I had suspected that this self-selection process that organizations, big organizations, go through was actually destructive to the D&I initiatives. And one of the things that Revature validated for me was you could cast that net to 700 universities, put those folks side by side with the self-selected process that you were going through, and they would meet or beat those expectations every single time. And for me, that was the light bulb moment, that this can be done at scale, not just Revature, but a lot of the organizations that are represented within this partnership at HITEC. This can be done at scale, but it has to be done differently, and it has to be championed by people who are absolutely passionate about the outcome and are willing to measure themselves and measure their organization against that outcome. That, for me, is the most profound thing that needs to exist to create a vibrant community, a durable process where folks are brought under the tent. And as I said earlier, the rigidity of the old school process of evaluating talent is ultimately broken. But it really starts at every level, right? So as I said earlier, it's not only the C-suite. The C-suite becomes less relevant very quickly. I mean, I had the air cover of a CEO who was, he was unconditionally supportive of this initiative. at my former employer. But then I would find folks that would actually become roadblocks throughout the organization who just had no interest in changing the inertia of their process, who had no interest in innovating, no interest in investing. So you really have to fight your way. You have to hack your way through that to get to a place where you create a consistent supply of diverse talent.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great point. Amit, I would like to close with you because I would like to still leave some time for the Q&A. This is carrying such a good conversation. This is really so much material to keep going here. But if you could tell us perhaps in like a couple of minutes, from your personal experience, what frustrates Hispanic technology applicants in the pursuit of the first job? What are those main roadblocks? Hispanic is specific.
So what are the main roadblocks for pursuing your first job, right, from folks of Hispanic background? One thing I should mention to the group online is that while my parents are originally from India, I was born and raised in Chicago. My parents are from India. My wife's actually from Mexico. And we have 3 kids. So I'm, I guess, the father of, Hispanic, children. And so this topic actually comes up more generally in our house and certainly in our broader extended family. I think one of the challenges, and some of these challenges are broadly defined, Jorge, but I think some of them are specific to the community. I think one is access to networks, access to individuals that can give them an opportunity to get an interview at a company, access to individuals that can give background on an industry, access to networks and individuals that can provide tips, provide encouragement, provide support. Because as we saw in this survey, the Hispanic community has a large number of first-time college goers and not a lot of folks that have done internships, right? Oftentimes because they may not have had, a parent or a family member or an uncle or someone that's been able to get them that internship. A lot of it is really on their shoulders. A lot of it is really on the shoulders of the students or the recent grads that are seeking those jobs. And so, from, my own experience, it is this opportunity to relationships, to networks that's been the real part that's thwarted the ability to really advance in some cases. It's just put more work. And as somebody who grew up in an immigrant household, I always, when I think back to my conversations with my dad, one of the things he always reminded me of is in some ways we just have to work harder as folks from immigrant backgrounds, because there's just this notion of needing to stand out to make a difference. We may not have those relationships, we may not have that exposure, we may not have that understanding. And so, but that's also the opportunity, right? Because I think what I would say to that individual that's feeling frustrated or lost or doesn't have a job, and especially in this context, and I know this is gonna sound maybe a little too optimistic or idealistic, but in some ways that's what's kind of America's all about, right? That the country is a country that has invited people from so many different backgrounds to find an opportunity. And for people with attitude, for people with drive, for people with the willingness to work hard, even though it's not easy, and certainly in this moment, it's definitely not easy, that there is that those paths exist, right? It's still the largest economy in the world, and it's a country of a lot of opportunity, particularly, Jorge, in technology-related fields. And so I would say, stay encouraged, stay optimistic, look for relationships. If you're early in your career and you're coming from a background, look for relationships of folks that are a little further along. There's LinkedIn, there's Handshake, there's so many ways to build those relationships. I think I can't emphasize the importance enough of building relationships. And it's not something you inherit. Of course, people inherit relationships from their parents and so forth, but a lot of this is networks that we can create, right? And that's, I think, the opportunity. So if you're feeling frustrated, if one's feeling frustrated because of those things that I mentioned that are true, and I don't want to deny them, there are real barriers, right? Sometimes unintentional barriers, but the opportunity is also that with the right attitude and aptitude, which is what we also look for at Revature, you know, you can still make it.
Thank you. Thank you. I can attest to that by personal experience. Network is such a fundamental way to move forward here. And having someone who has been through it and can teach you the ropes and the politics of advancing in your career is a fundamental part of reaching success. Having said that, I mean, such a rich discussion. I would like to hand it over to Viviana, back to Viviana, and perhaps move to some Q&A while we still have time.
Perfect. Sounds good. We'll get right to it. One of our HITEC leaders, Angela Cruz, has a question. Angela, you want to go ahead and share your question?
Thank you, Viviana. Hi, everyone. I am Angela Cruz. I'm a 30-year veteran of the IT and technology world. And I congratulate you for what you're doing. I didn't know that there were companies and organizations doing this type of stuff. I went through everything that you described in my long career. I started my career with AT&T, and when I watched the movie Hidden Figures, I identified myself with the movie, not with the discrimination part, because I actually landed a job at a company that was very nurturing of me, but in terms of identifying myself with everything you described. So congratulations, and I hope to learn a lot more about your company. The question was actually answered by what was asked by the last gentleman. I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged you and that I hope that at some point we can collaborate. Right now, I am an entrepreneur. I left the corporate world, but I continue to be very engaged in the community, volunteering with organizations to encourage more STEM representation in this field. And I also take this opportunity, Viviana, to introduce a friend of mine who joined the call. His name is Juan Casimiro, who also does a lot of youth programs, and just this week finished a tech program for kids between, I think it was 12 to 20. So amazing work, and thank you, HITEC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Angela.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question that came through a little bit earlier was around retention, and what are your retention numbers, specifically around people of color?
Yeah, so I don't have any data on people of color. I have data around our placement of associates within enterprises. And within the first 1 to 2 years, it's 95%. Within the next 2 to 3 years, it drops down to 93%. And then out to 4 years, it's at 89%. And I think what's interesting about the retention numbers is I think it speaks to the preparation or this notion of how we close the skills gap and how organizations need to close that skills gap and to get folks productive very quickly, and to get them to a place where they are commercially prepared for an environment that is much different than what they've experienced in academia. So bridging that, whether or not you're doing it within a large bank or a large technology organization, or you're doing it at Revature, it's really, really important, I think, to the outcome in terms of retention numbers. And I'll say one more thing, and that is that people like to work on cool things. And what's interesting for me is the engagement of the business with the technology organization directly, I think is also a big differentiator for firms that have high retention numbers as opposed to lower retention numbers. So the notion that you're a software engineer, you're not just working on a widget, you're working on something that's generating revenue or it's managing risk, and you see the outcome, you see the output, and you understand where you sit within the organization and what your individual effort is producing every day on behalf of that organization. That kind of alignment in terms of the work and the output, and ultimately the firm's alignment with all of that, I think is really, really important. I mean, I could go on the retention piece for hours, but we do not have any specific numbers related to people of color.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have another question from Jason Rueda. Jason?
Hi, thank you. So I've worked very, very hard for a number of years creating a program within my company, the company that I work for, that's a university outreach to find local university students who don't come from the Yale, the Stanford, the Harvard, and what have you, who don't want to have this ridiculous overhead once they graduate, but still are brilliant because, quite frankly, the student makes the university, not the other way around. You just simply get an amazing Rolodex. So while we work to bring them in and try to help bring them up, nurture them, coach, mentor, even sponsor them, is there something that you're finding that can bring the experienced executive up to that next level? Because you're doing something that's shepherding them in, but as people are pulling them up, they eventually become equal level with them. So how do we ensure that the mid-level or even senior level executive that is doing the pulling can constantly raise so that they always have room to pull them up?
Well, first of all, Jason, congratulations to you on the effort that you've expended on behalf of your organization. I think that's fantastic. I've spoken to a lot of managers over the course of my career, and I get the question, what's the path to leadership? What's the path to managing? And the first rung in that ladder is mentorship. And good mentors make great leaders, in my opinion, right? They have empathy. They focus on individuals, right? And what they can contribute. They're willing to share, right? All those qualities are ultimately what leads to good leadership, and particularly empathy. And so when a new student enters or an aspirant enters an organization, the first thing I say to them if they ask for advice is find your mentor. You'll be assigned a mentor more likely than not, but find that natural mentor. Find that person who has a natural interest in you. And what you find is that those mentors who show a natural interest are the ones who will become the future leadership. And I can't think of anything more strategically important for this organization in terms of paying it forward by being good mentors. Because if you're a good mentor, ultimately you're going to progress professionally.
Thank you. So we have two more questions, and then I know we're going to go over time a little bit, but I know there's two questions folks want to ask, and then we'll wrap it up. Maria Rodriguez, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, yes. My name is Maria Rodriguez. Just for a very quick context and background, I attended Revature training in Reston, Virginia. I used to have a business background, and I've been at my work assignment for a little over a year. And my question is, when you're working someplace at a company that doesn't have strong Hispanic corporate ties, what is the best way for you to stay connected with the Latino community for future opportunities?
Join HITEC.
Okay.
Bob,
So this is-
Bob, you're mute.
I think, Maria, you've done it. You've checked the box. You're here at HITEC, right? And it's great to meet you as a fellow Revature colleague.
Maria, this is Omar Duque with HITEC. So number one, thank you for joining us. And yes, we would love for you to be part of the HITEC community. But, also there's other organizations that we partner with, depending on where you are and your particular field of profession or personal interest. There's a number of organizations that I'd be more than happy to connect you with. Our team would be more than happy to connect you with. Obviously, we'd love for you to be part of HITEC. But we can help kind of guide you and steer you a little bit to an organization that might probably make the most sense for you.
Sure. And if I may, just like to piggyback on that, oftentimes there's local organizations at the meetup level in that they happen more spontaneously and they happen more like in a social setting. And those are great resources to talk to people who are facing many of the same challenges also by virtue of geography. So it's interesting. You can look and you'll be surprised the number of the small little meetups organizations that exist to that with that purpose.
And this is Viviana. I'll just add one quick tip there. This is a great start. And once you start opening those conversations, it'll continue to open doors. So this is one door. And then as Omar mentioned, we can connect you to other organizations, and then you'll continue to connect to other people and folks that have other, windows of opportunity. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, of course.
All right, so we're gonna go to our final question from Juan Casimiro. Juan, are you online?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Perfect. How are you?
Thank you. I guess my question is kind of two-part. One is, what's the single most concern or need, if you will, that the college grad is coming out without, rather, who's graduating without a certain specific skill set? That's one piece. But the other piece is, let's not undermine the entrepreneurial zeal and interest. For example, the students we work with are coming in with technology, but very entrepreneurial. How do corporations deal with that? How do you deal with that? And how can we keep fostering it? That's what we have an army of entrepreneurs who are in technology and many other areas as well.
You want to take that one?
Sure. Great question on fostering entrepreneurship. I love the question. It's something that I think America needs more of, right? That we as a country, regardless of our background, regardless of where we came from, regardless of where we're going, the kind of entrepreneurial ethos is something that is really becoming a 21st century core skill set. Whether you are looking to start an organization or whether you're inside of an organization, the entrepreneurial spirit is something that's so critical. So how do you build it? How do you develop it? One of the things that I've learned from when I was in Silicon Valley that I tried to bring into the universities I had the opportunity to be with was just the ways in which these organizations work. And one of the things that I think the entrepreneurial skill set really focuses on first is assessing opportunities. And entrepreneurs, whether you're inside of a company or whether you're still looking to do a startup, are able to do market assessments, are able to identify trends, identify players that are going after that trend, and look for ways to offer something new or unique in that market opportunity. So I think the first skill set is really marketing. It's the ability to understand who a customer is. What are the types of price points that a customer is willing to pay? What are the ways to look at who are the different players in the market, to do segmentation? In a marketing class I took once, I talked about the 4 Ps of marketing. If I can even remember them now, it's product, positioning, pricing, and placement, I think it is. And an entrepreneurial skill set involves the ability to, I think, put marketing first at some level, the ability to look and understand and analyze market opportunities. The second piece of this is building the understanding of how to launch new products. And there's a lot of great books now on lean startup and developing MVPs, minimum viable products. That sort of ethos that really I think Silicon Valley is starting to teach the world is something that we can teach our community here that we're talking about, our Hispanic community. That ability to develop a product or a service is something that is a more iterative process we're now coming to learn in the 21st century. And so that notion that you can build a high level concept, get some market testing, validate it, and then kind of fine tune it until you eventually launch a product. That's the second category of skill. So one is market analysis, the other is product development. And then the third piece I wanted to just bring up was and by the way, there's a lot of great books on that, a lot of great articles on it, an amazing number of YouTube on that that is out there. Eric Ries, who wrote Lean Startup, has some great stuff that I think is worthwhile as one seeks to develop that product development capability. And then the third entrepreneurial skill set that is out there that I think is important is fundraising, the ability to ask for money. And that could be external, talking to a venture capitalist or an investor, or that could be internal when you're asking for a board or asking for a boss or asking for an executive for capital to go do something. Because entrepreneurs need funds to be successful. They need to build teams, they need resources to go develop products. And I think that skill set is one, at least in my experience, that just has come from talking to a lot of different people, trying to find people who maybe made investments and made mistakes, watching Shark Tank, right? And watching the way in which people ask for money there, and looking at other avenues. But I would kind of put the entrepreneurial, skills into those three buckets of marketing related, product related, and fundraising, and then kind of building an understanding out there. And thank goodness for YouTube, because I think a lot of the great lessons, just like, handiwork around the house, you can, I think, learn a lot off of just what we have online, but certainly getting mentors to fine tune and ask questions, as Bob was saying earlier, to reinforce.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you. Well, Jorge, I'll hand it back over to you. I think you wanted to share some closing remarks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Viviana, and thank you to the larger HITEC familia. This was a fantastic conversation. There's so much more that we can explore, so much more that we can do around this. And this is at the core, really, of what we gather together as a community of common interest, right? Really to advance Latinos in the technology world. And it's great. We need to keep doing more of these kind of conversations with Revature, outside of Revature, within the HITEC community, under the umbrella of this family and common interests. I really encourage you all to take the main takeaways from what we learned today and apply them in the real world, in your jobs or in your school, and let's try to all advance together and support each other. That's what we have. That's our community, and let's pull forward together. With that, just pass it super quick to Bob and wrap up. And perhaps,
so I think it was some great discussions here today. I think we've got we would like to come back to you guys with some of our summary findings and a call to action. But I just want to take one moment to acknowledge Jorge and let everyone know on the call that he was just accepted and started the MBA program at Cal.
Great. Thank you.
Really proud of you.
Felicidades. Congratulations.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Well, wonderful. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Perfect. So well, that is it. Well, thank you so much. Amit, I don't know if you have one final line for remark and
just
respect everyone's time and give them back the Friday.
Yeah, just a thank you to HITEC, and thank you for doing everything that you do. Your mission is super important to expand diversity and access for Hispanics across the country into tech careers. My wife is a Hispanic in the tech career, and I think was just listening in for a part of this and said, wow, these guys are great. So anyway, just passing along her appreciation as well as mine. You guys are doing great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Revature, first of all, for your partnership and for the opportunity to bring this community together of students and executives. I think it's super important, and I think that there's many more opportunities to do this in the future. So thank you for sharing your insight, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you all for joining us on this Friday, and we will see you all next week. Thank you all so much. Have a
Viviana.
Thank you.
Viviana, before we go, if anyone has any questions about the surveys or wants some particular data, please feel free to reach out directly to me. My contact information is on the slide going on right now. Happy to share the information with you.
And we can definitely forward those requests as well. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Bye.